Thomas Morelli here from Thomas Morelli Photography in Brewer, Maine. You know, we've been enjoying sending tips out to people about photography and Photoshop, and here's another video tip for you this week, and it's how I do my basic retouching. Anytime I photograph a high school senior or a child or a family, I really try to get the best exposure and the best color I can straight out of the camera because I don't want to spend a lot of time in Photoshop. But here's what I do when I import the file, and it's almost perfect, but I got just a little tweaking to do, maybe some blemishes or stray hairs, little tweaking on the color correction or on the exposure. So I want to show you the order I do them in. So if you look at my screen, basically here's the straight out of the camera file, and I'm using a slightly older version of Photoshop. I usually use Photoshop Creative Cloud, the online version, subscription version, but I want to show you what I do can be done in any version of Photoshop pretty much that has layers in it. So don't feel bad if you're starting out. And some of these things will also work for Lightroom, but basically this is a Photoshop tutorial. Here's our basic file. It looks pretty good. I mean, I could send that to the printer and get an okay print back, but we don't want an okay print. We want a fantastic print for our clients. So what I normally do is I start off with how is the exposure, and the exposure is pretty much right on. So really all we're going to be working on is maybe stray hairs and maybe a little bit of color correction. So I usually will go down to my layers palette and add a second layer because we want to work on the top layer so that we can blend or paint out or undo what we aren't happy with. So here's our top layer. I also often work with adjustment layers. So I'm going to use an adjustment layer to correct any color. So we're going to go up to color balance. And this just looks slightly cool to me. Now your monitor is going to vary from mine, of course. Mine is calibrated to my lab, but you get the idea here. I want to warm this up. I like warm skin tones, so I'm going to bring in the highlights area, just a little bit of warmer color, yellow and red. And you can see through our preview that that definitely brought it up to the range that I'm looking for. It was a nice yellow bouncing light day. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's kind of hard to color correct if you get too much yellow bouncing off the leaves. That's why I use an off-camera flash with a softbox so that my exposure on the face comes from the actual softbox and not from the yellow leaf and the light that are bouncing off the leaves. So we're pretty close already. Look at that and that. Now all we have to do is a little bit of retouching. So the retouching, I normally have a retouching layer, and we're going to start with the hair. And there's not a lot to be done here. I just use the clone tool. I go in if there's any little stray hairs, and these are pretty minimal. Some people don't even bother with these if they're this minimal, but I just like to go in and maybe touch them up just slightly. The wind was blowing that day. It was like a natural wind machine, so I like that wind-blown look. So I'm not going to fix this stuff that's going on they actually liked. So that is our hair, and then as far as our blemishes, she doesn't really have much for blemishes. She was a good girl and used her cover stick and really had good skin, but I will go in using my patch tool, and I will just quickly go in and fix the things that need fixing. Again, she doesn't need much. I usually go in if there's these little darker areas in the chin. I like to clean those up a little bit, even though it's not a blemish. I just think it cleans it up a bit. I'll usually go in and do a little bit under the eyes because we're going to lighten that up. And you'll see it looks a little heavy now, but we're going to blend it with our layers palette. Alright, so if we go over to our layers palette, we're at 100% right now. We kind of back that off. You can see how we just sort of mix it right about there. Beautiful. Alright, I actually am going to flatten that so that we go back down to one image, so we've kind of saved everything we've done there. And then I'm going to make another layer, and we're going to add a little vignette to this. I'm going to back off here. And my vignettes are handmade, meaning that I will take a darker tone that is warm, like a warm brown, and I will make a rather large brush, and I'll just go in and paint in a little vignette. I haven't cropped this yet, but I'm just going to leave it wide open crop wise for you to see. And I'm being very ham-handed here, but you can see. And let's say that we wanted to crop this, that they're going to make a 16 by 20. So we'll make a 16 by 20 crop, which of course then if they want anything proportionate to that, 8 by 10s. But I like the horizontal format, so I'm going to keep that right about there. And that is pretty close. So fix your exposure, then your color, then go in and remove stray hairs and fix the blemishes, and then we flatten it and save it, and that is what will go off to our lab. So remember, as much as you can, get good exposure and proper color and all the other things in the camera, and you can see what little tweaking I did. It was 4 minutes worth of stuff. I can usually do it in a couple minutes if we're careful. So thanks. We look forward to seeing you soon. We'll have more tips coming up on Photoshop, marketing, photography, all kinds of good stuff coming up. So stay tuned.